airplane carriers are great in World War II, but now what you want are a million drones that like there's no defense against, right? No Iron Dome is going to take down a million drones. You just can't do it, right? They just swarm into your country, and that's what AI is now, is a million drones, a million Bittensor subnets sometime in the future, and each one expert in some sliver or some vertical, some advantage, right, that they specialize in. It's a million specialists, and the specialists all coordinate with one another and are composable and stackable like DeFi, and they probably pay each other in crypto because crypto is the only form of money that that AI can own, right? So I think that's the world we live in, the bazaar of a billion drones. The best stuff comes from the weird edges, right? Like Satoshi Nakamoto. Who's that? Albert Einstein. Who the fuck's that? Who the fuck's this patent clerk? Who did he think? What does he think? What does he think he knows that's better than us physicists, right? Galileo Galilei was like he was like a fringe, kooky, a pseudoscientist back in his day, right? The church was the serious science people, right? They're like, "Ugh, we know it. We know what goes around. What bodies go around what? The Earth does not go around the sun. You infidel, right?" And so he was like the kooky, crazy conspiracy theorist, penetrating radar in the pyramids, but 1600 style, right? So you don't know. Usually the advances and the new stuff comes from the kooky edges, and 99% of it's kooky, and it's going to die, and it's stupid. Then 0.1% of it is Galileo, it's Einstein, it's Nikola Tesla, right? And so you have to sift through that stuff and not be afraid of the kooky edge, because that's where the good stuff also is. People now are like, "Oh, utility tokens didn't work. That was bullshit." Well, it didn't work because Gary Gensler attacked everybody who did it, right? So evolutionary pressure killed off that whole subgenre of crypto, of the utility token. But the idea is completely has merit. It's exactly what the United States did with the dollar when they unhooked it from gold in 1973, and then hooked it up to Saudi Arabia. The petrodollar, right? You had to have dollars to buy Saudi Arabian oil. So what was the dollar in that case? Well, the United States dollar was a utility token for the Saudi oil app, right? So, and it worked, right? That's what gave the dollar value. It created demand for dollars. Less true today than it was back then, but that was what sort of kicked off the petrodollar, and that sustained the dollar through that period. Rome is not the marble of the Senate. It's the sand of the Colosseum. You got to get down in the sand of the Colosseum. And Bittensor hasn't done that yet. It's still wandering around the marble of the Senate going, "Oh, us senators were so smart. Our brains are so big. Our craniums are filled with ideas all the time," right? Like, I love the Bittensor guys, but honestly, the Brainiac shit, is they're spending too much time. They don't think this is a problem, but it's a massive problem.
Welcome to the Ventura Labs podcast. Today, we're joined by Mark Jeffrey, a forward thinker immersed in the Bittensor ecosystem. He explores the dynamics of subnet token economics and why smaller expert AI models might outshine centralized giants. Mark stresses the importance of doxing as a bedrock of trust in crypto, pushing for user-friendly blockchain tools to boost adoption, and the clash between meme coin hype and serious market strategies. We dive into Bittensor's real-world legitimacy, its hidden potential in niche markets, and how AI's rise could transform education, intellectual property, and robotics. Now, back to Mark with the 35th Ventura Labs podcast. Mark Jeffries, welcome. Round 2. How you feeling today?
Back in the saddle and ready to rock. Thanks for inviting me back.
There you go. We were talking beforehand, and you brought up some interesting points. Why do you think there is this affinity towards not wanting to dox yourself in Bittensor specifically? Is that just a crypto phenomenon?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking. I mean, like, let's call out who I'm talking about, right? So we're talking about Taobot, and for those who don't know, Taobot. If you're in the Bittensor ecosystem and you're investing in subnets, you have to have a Tau wallet, and you have to go buy some Tau somewhere, like on Kraken or whatever, and then you have to invest in the subnets directly on the Tau chain using one of the several websites. Taustats.io is the big one. There's some other ones popping up now that are also pretty good. And that's too difficult for a lot of people, right? So along comes Taobot, and it's Tau.bot, and their value proposition is, hey, don't worry about that bullshit. Just if you have an Ethereum wallet and you have some Ether, you can now invest in Subnet tokens. And so you basically connect your Ethernet wallet to them, and then your Ether is exchanged via their system for Tau, and then you have Tau in their system. So it's like it's like their own little mini centralized exchange, right?
Yeah.
So your Tau is like in your account, and then you can buy Subnet tokens in your account on that system. And then when you want to cash out, sell your Subnet tokens back to Tau. Tau goes back across the bridge to Ether. Now you've got Ether, hopefully more of it, back in your MetaMask wallet. Right, so it's a lot easier, right? So that's the good news, and I've done all this, and that all appears to work. Bad news is this: the team has not doxed themselves behind Taobot. We don't know who these people are. We don't know if we're going to wake up one morning and all the Ethereum that I uploaded to their site, and I only uploaded a very small amount because I don't trust them. It might be gone. Right? We could wake up and the Taobot site is just vanished. Their Twitter accounts are gone, right? And so's your Ethereum, and it's gone, like they say in South Park, right? So, I suspect that there's going to be some scams in the Tau universe, especially as it becomes more popular. And I don't know if these guys are a scam or not, but I don't like the fact that they're not doxing themselves. Like it's very suspicious. So I don't know what that is. I don't know why. I would think you would want to. If you had a legit product, like you would want to, because there's a legit need to invest in subnet tokens using only Solana or using only Ethereum, and nobody legit that we know is doxed has cracked that yet. So I'm still waiting.
There is also still some big players in the Bittensor ecosystem with like legitimate things that are like pseudo docs. Like some people know who they are, but most people don't. Why do you think that is? Is that just they don't want a target on their back, being known for like a BitTensor whale or something?
Are you talking about subnet guys or validator guys?
Yeah,
Or
there is some subnet developers. Namaray is probably the biggest one that's most commonly known.
Yeah, I
I don't
know
know
of
if you.
Namaray, and
Yeah.
so we don't know who he is, right? So, my guess is like those people, like we know they're legit, right? Like Namaray is producing very legit stuff. He's clearly, expert in AI and clearly expert in Bittensor, and is a gem of our little universe over here. Nobody questions that. Probably for security is my guess that a lot of these people don't want to show their faces because the CEO of Ledger was recently kidnapped and they chopped off his finger trying to get to
Damn.
his crypto. I don't know if you know about that.
Nah.
So these sort of abductions are becoming more commonplace for people who are well-known crypto people. Who people know they have a giant stack of whatever. So my guess is Namaray just doesn't. He wants to keep his fingers. That's my read on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you've been very outspoken on your detail trades and investments. What are your takeaways since detail's been live?
Yeah, I mean, I think since it came out, the initial question was, is it smart to invest now, right? Like right when it launched. And even like the OGs were kind of like, nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen. Now, there was some sort of sideways hints from Const and a few other people, hey, I wouldn't invest until like day 60 or day 90, something like that, right? And they were basically trying to warn off everyone because the Tau blockchain itself starts off by just gushing emissions into the liquidity pools of the AMM that's now built into the Tau blockchain that services all the DTAO subnet tokens and the exchange, which allows people to trade their Tau and for staked subnet tokens. So I that's why. But at a certain point, just looking at the market caps of the subnets, and I'm talking about not fully diluted. Fully diluted doesn't fucking matter. That's something that'll happen in a million years. We all know it'll happen in a million years, but not today, right? And if you look at, and everybody's, historically speaking, crypto-wise, looking at coin market cap, the only thing which has ever mattered is the circulating amount at that time, right? If there's some fully diluted thing way in the future, who gives a shit, right? Like we know it's coming, but it's way down the road. So I'm worried about today. So I think the same thing applies to subnet tokens, that only their circulating supply is what matters. And so the market caps are based on that circulating supply. So looking at how small those market caps were and still are, they start at like 100K, and they go up to probably at the high end now we're touching on 30 million. A couple weeks ago we were at about 20 million, and the overall trend, if you look at the market cap of the entire subnet space, has gone from basically zero, whatever, 6 or however many number of weeks ago it was that it launched. Is it
Yeah.
8 now? I can't remember where we're at, but I
Yeah.
think is it
Almost
6?
2 months in.
Yeah, so like
Probably
8 weeks.
less.
So okay, so we're like 8 weeks into this. Started off at zero. It's now at 160 million total, and it's been a very steady line up, and that's in dollar terms, right? So if you look at what these subnets are doing, not all of them, but a good chunk of them, they are doing exactly what venture-backed AI startups are doing that are worth billions in many cases. So, you have like 10 million here and, 5 billion over here, and the two entities are doing basically the same thing. It almost like I look at that and I'm like, we're like insane if we're not buying subnet tokens. And people are like, no, but it's going to crash from like $12 down to 2. Well, you know what? Ethereum was once $12 and it crashed down to $2. And nobody can time the market, so you don't know like when it's going to go up or when it's going to go down real fast, right? But if you bought at $2 or $12, and then Ethereum became worth $4,500, do you really give a shit if you bought it at 12 or 2? No, kind of. I mean, you wish it was 2 because you'd have 4 times as much, but you still got in at 12, which is still better than most people. So, still pretty good, right? So I feel like we're in that moment with subnet tokens where we'll wish we could get in a time machine and go back to this moment where all these absurdly low market caps are available for the taking. And the reason why they're so absurdly low is because the Bittensor universe is hard to get into, as I mentioned at the top of the show. So that's what I think.
Yeah. And then do you have specific favorites? I've seen you tweet about. Is there any type of subnet you think is better suited or you look to invest in?
I mean, I try to go for serious stuff as much as possible. What does that mean? I don't know. Just it feels serious. The people seem serious. Like Nova's a great example, right? Like, so Nova's got a subnet where they are hunting pharma molecules, and the way that their model works is they could not get venture funded because they're hunting in the search space that they're hunting in is something that nobody would fund because it's highly speculative, which means you'll probably find nothing. But if you do find something, holy shit, right? Like that's what they're doing. It's like the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, right? You point a telescope at the sky, you're probably not going to hear anything, but if you do hear something, holy shit, right? So they're kind of doing the same thing for pharma molecules, and that's a very, very serious thing. And so I like that one, and the market cap is still relatively low. My thesis on this, though, is all the market caps are low, so you might as well go for things that are they're definitely contenders to win, right? Like, so we know Shoots and Targon, Shoots especially. Shoots is up to 30 million this morning. I didn't see that. Okay, awesome. So Shoots is on. Oh, Shoots is launching their
Agent
their parent
platform.
company. Yeah, is launching their agent. Make an agent with no code product. So they're productizing their AI, right? So I like that, right? Proprietary trading network doing something similar where they are, they're basically productizing their AI's ability to predict markets. Well, I don't know how good this will be, but assuming AI is better than humans at predicting markets, that'll be a valuable product. Templar is a new, sort of newish up and comer. Gradients is part of the Shoots, threesome. So it's one of the three that are sort of powering that network of agents. TensorPlex Dojo, although it's not doing great today. They're backed by, I can't remember, they're backed by Binance.
CZ from Binance,
Yeah, it
yeah.
is Binance. Okay, so they're the Binance one. So I don't know what that means, but I like the fact that CZ's jumped in on one, right? So Hippias, that one Mog pointed out. I bought more of that just last night, actually, and I'm up 39% today. Awesome. So yeah, they're basically like they're basically like a file coin, but in the Bittensor universe, they're decentralized storage. So anyway, so all these things. There's like some sponsor behind them, like Mog Machine, or CZ, or Yuma, which is Barry Silbert's BitTensor accelerator. So it's one of those. Some decent entity has sort of said, yeah, I'm standing up and saying this is a real thing. So it's not a rug, right? And that they're serious AI people. Curiously enough, one of the other ones that I sort of hold is Kato, Kiato, and they are they have huge presence on X, and they also have another token. So some people don't like that, and they also have a subnet which they claim is willpower or is powering to a certain degree their main Kato offering. Which is debatable. Some people, I've heard a lot of BitTensor OGs don't like them. Keith Singery actually just texted me or DM me, or not DM me. He tweeted me this, or whatever we call it these days, posted to me this morning that he's not like a real big fan of what's going on with Kato. I poked him in their Discord last night. I was like, hey, so we haven't heard from you guys in a while. Are you doing anything with this subnet? And I think they're like subnet. I don't remember their number, but it's like 3 or something like that. Yeah, they have a low number, but anyway. So I was like, hey, so if you're not going to use your subnet, you should sell it, right? So that people who have invested in the tokens of your subnet, you get that low number, which makes it great real estate in BitTensor space. I think it's like number 3 or number 5. I can't remember which one it is.
Yeah, Kaido's number 5. 3 is Templar.
Kato's number 5. Thank you. So so if you're not using number 5. That's prime real estate. Like, fucking sell it. Like Mog just sold 18 to someone, right? And it did a completely new subnet, completely new AI project within that subnet number. And anyone who holds that subnet's tokens immediately sort of inherit the new AI project, right? So anyway, that was sort of what I said to Kato. I was like, no, we're gonna have a lot of announcements real soon. So I don't know, but that looks pretty interesting. But they've been weirdly silent, and so it's sort of a strike against them, I guess. And they haven't been very specific about what they're doing. And the BitTensor OGs don't seem to like them. They don't seem to trust them. They think they're kind of they got a subnet, but it's kind of bullshit. Is sort of the vibe I get. Without they don't come out and say that, but that's sort of the vibe I get. So I don't like that. But the Kato name is so large that if this Solana/Ethereum subnet token trading universe appears out of nowhere, which it might any day, Kato will have that brand recognition. So all the people who don't know the subnets that come from the Solana universe, who know Kato but don't know anything else, will be like, oh, that one, I know that name, I'll invest in that, right? So I think that it could see a boom just because of that. So I own a little bit of it, not a lot. It's not one of my bigger ones. I'm deep in shoots as an example, but not Kato. I have like a fun pile just in case something happens with it.
A cautious amount.
Yeah.
Do you think any of these subnets will be around 10, 20 years from now, or have potential to be around 10, 20 years from now, or be relevant?
Absolutely. I mean, I mean, if they're not, then this whole thing failed, right? So, I mean, I think the question initially for me was, and actually Balaji wrote a post on this not long ago, where he basically said, look, I thought we were going to get the monotheistic, he called it, AIs, the cathedral version, the very big and the very centralized and the very large, so Google, OpenAI, Grok, that was one or some combination of those would be the winner, because you had to have the chips in order to power the AI, and only they could amass the chipsets that enough chipsets or enough chips that were large, to create a network large enough to create new frontier models, and to tune them, right? So we all thought we were going to get these monotheistic, godlike, singular AIs, and then DeepSeek came out. Like China basically, there's probably some bullshit in what China announced, but there was also a lot of truth, and they released a white paper so you can see exactly what they did. and they basically proved that, hey, you know what? You don't need all these chips like you thought you did. And in fact, the models can be built on for a fraction of what you thought, and they can also run on a fraction of what you thought powerful chips. So, I mean, DeepSeek, people were running them on their Android phones. People were running the model on their Android phones, right? Which is insane. Like nobody thought that was possible, right? So what that meant was we now live in a world of a million vertically expert AIs, right? That are it's sort of like a drone swarm versus fighter jets, right? Or like a or like a an airplane carrier, right? You don't want airplane carrier. Airplane carriers are great in World War II, but now what you want are a million drones that like there's no defense against, right? No Iron Dome is going to take down a million drones. You just can't do it, right? They just swarm into your country, and that's what AI is now, is a million drones, a million Bittensor subnets sometime in the future, and each one expert in some sliver or some vertical, some advantage, right, that they specialize in. It's a million specialists, and the specialists all coordinate with one another and are composable and stackable like DeFi, and they probably pay each other in crypto because crypto is the only form of money that that AI can own, right? So I think that's the world we live in, the bazaar of a billion drones, and I think Bittensor appears to be the best infrastructure for supporting that universe. So some people disagree. Some people will say Virtuals is the better one, or they'll say Eliza OS is the better one, right? So it's debatable, but so far the serious stuff appears to be gravitating towards Bittensor subnets. So I think some of those will break out, and some of those will become quite large, and hopefully mainstays like sort of Microsoft's of some vertical AI or some capability which services AI in the Bittensor universe. 10 years is a long time, but I think it's possible. I mean, Bitcoin has been around for 16 years at this point, so this either works or it doesn't. If it does work, then yeah, we got plenty of things that are around in 10 years.
You seem to be a proponent of like smaller expert models instead of one giant like multi-trillion parameter model. Is that, you think we're trending towards that reality?
I think we are. And actually we've seen that pattern many times in compute history before. I mean, we used to have mainframes, right? The guy who ran Digital Equipment Corporation, Ken Olsen, at one point said there's a world market for 5 computers, and that's it. And by that he meant like giant monster honking mainframe computers. And then along came the PC, and the PC was regarded as a dopey toy. And lo and behold, here in the future, we live in a universe of a bunch of PCs connected through the internet, largely, right? There's a bunch of little, kind of beefed up PCs that are servers, but even those are basically PCs, right? So the small drone won. The other time, we've seen it again with the online services versus the internet. We had these cathedral online services like AOL, like CompuServe, like Prodigy, and you logged into this one place, and for a while it looked like AOL was going to run the world, right? Then along came the internet. The internet was open, decentralized. Anyone could put up a website. Nobody controlled it. There was no one entity that controlled it. Other than like ICANN, you had to go through somebody to get your domain, but that was kind of it. And they were more or less neutral. So it was like going to Switzerland. It was fine. Everyone was okay with it. They weren't a gatekeeper. They wouldn't refuse you. So anything goes. You could put up any sort of website. And that one, that vision, which again was a decentralized, lots of little vision, won against the cathedrals of AOL and CompuServe and Prodigy because of their decentralized nature. So, again, we've seen this pattern. This fractal repeats again and again and again throughout history. So I see no reason why it won't repeat here.
And do you think the decentralized wins because it's just smaller groups and they're able to adapt quicker?
Yeah, they're like little speedboats versus the big giant. I mean, the big giant cathedrals, and also the big giant cathedrals have big giant bills, right? So I mean, OpenAI is famously just incinerating cash at like this galactic pace, right? They're not making any money. It's the opposite. They're just burning money, And it's true that they're the ones that sort of kicked off this whole revolution with ChatGPT. But it looks like they're going to, they're like a black hole that's eating itself. And I don't see how they get out of that, because I don't know how they monetize it. In a world where I think AI becomes free, right? Like it goes to free, and it's like Linux, right? So, there was once upon a time you could sell operating systems to enterprise and make a pile of cash. Then along came Linux, and now operating systems were free, and people bolted on all kinds of vertical modifications and support and other products around the freemium model, as it became known. Again, this is another fractal that has repeated itself, right? We don't have the behemoths controlling the operating systems. It's open and free, and anyone can contribute and build services on top of it. And so that's why I think this vision will win, because it is much more nimble. Because you can't, whoever you are, however big you are, you're not bigger than the entire world, and the entire world is your competition, right? You can't fight the whole world. So I think that's the world we're living in right now.
Yeah. And then you brought up an interesting point, the team sizes there. When evaluating teams in Bittensor, do you look for certain things? Like, you want to see a specific team size, amount of people, or like history, those type of things?
Not really. I don't know what's going to work. What I look for is that you're serious, right? And you appear to be serious people. You appear to be, you're not just there to sort of, like, there was one subnet that arose that was, I think it was called LOL or something. They were clearly not serious, right? They were trying to make like a meme subnet, right? So
Yeah.
how about fuck you? No. Not here. I mean, if you want to play those games, Pump That Fun is just around the corner. Go over there, right? We don't need that. We don't need that bullshit. We don't need that bullshit here. We're the serious people doing the serious things. So thankfully, it never took off. So it did get punished appropriately. Because I was worried for a minute there we were going to see 1,000 meme subnets, but we did not. So thankfully, that got killed quickly in the cradle. So, but I don't know. It could be one guy that comes up with the best subnet that we've never heard of, that has no known background in this stuff. The best stuff comes from the weird edges, right? Like Satoshi Nakamoto. Who's that? Albert Einstein. Who the fuck's this patent clerk? Who do he think? What does he think? What does he think he knows that's better than us physicists, right? Galileo Galilei was like he was like a fringe, kooky, a pseudoscientist back in his day, right? The church was the serious science people, right? They're like, "Ugh, we know it. We know what goes around. What bodies go around what? The earth does not go around the sun, you infidel." Right, and so he was like the kooky, crazy conspiracy theorist, penetrating radar in the pyramids, but 1600 style, right? So you don't know. Usually, the advances and the new stuff comes from the kooky edges, and 99% of it's kooky, and it's gonna die, and it's stupid. Then 0.1% of it is Galileo, it's Einstein, it's Nikola Tesla, right? And so you have to sift through that stuff, and not be afraid of the kooky edge, right? Because that's where the good stuff also is. That's what I think.
How do you navigate that kooky edge? Is there like green flags, red flags you look for in these type of people, or ideas they have?
I get them on the podcast and I look them in the eye. That's sort of honestly, that for me is sort of the best indicator one way or the other. And I can't tell you what that is. I just sort of look at them and, make them talk to me for an hour and see how they answer questions, see how dedicated they seem to be. It's usually someone will out themselves in a free and open discussion. I mean, Rogan talks about this, right? How you can kind of hide on his show. He's like, look, you can sort of hide on this show for about an hour, but by hour 2 or 3, you're going to cook yourself. There is just no way to survive in a long form environment. And I'm sure, Grant, you know about this too, right? So there is no way to live through this unless you're speaking from the heart and being authentic. Like Kamala Harris, that's why she stayed away from Rogan, because she knew she would get cooked, right? There was zero chance that she was going to live through it, right? And she wasn't even that skilled as an orator, and even the skilled orators can't usually live through something like this long form. But if you're talking about a technical thing, usually the time to explosion is far shorter, right? Because you're asking very pointed questions about technical stuff. So it's not just sort of like a free ranging discussion where you can kind of waddle around and sort of talk about nothing for a half an hour. It's like, okay, what does your subnet do? How does it do it? Right? Why do you think this AI is going to work versus that one? Right? Like the very pointed questions sort of out people faster. So I feel like if you're on for an hour, I'm gonna find you out. Or I'm gonna like you, right? Like I love the Nova guys, or the Nova. Sorry, it's a man and a woman, so the team, I should say, to be correct. Love them. They were clearly very serious people. I don't know if they'll find the pharma molecule, but I know they're going to try, and I know that they have the expertise to try, and it's a decent, it's a good stab. So that's what I look for.
Yeah. If the person's genuine or not is
Yeah,
a big thing. You can tell when you talk to them. I second what you have to say there. You talk to someone, you'll find out real quick.
yeah,
And then back to Bittensor, you've been a proponent of a lot of the tools that are available now. You've highlighted backprop in some of your recent podcast appearances.
yeah.
How do you feel about the tooling that's starting to show up in BitTensor? Are you liking these front ends? Because you've been begging for that front end.
I have. So I remember, if you remember, I used to like bang the drum. I'm like, "There's no front door. I need something like Coin Market Cap." Well, then we got it, and then we got it. And Taostats provided it. They were the first ones to give them props. Comma. However, they did it in a very Tao centric way, right? So there's an extraordinary amount of information in their interface. It's not consumer. It's Tao people.
Yeah.
It's for you and me. It's for you and me and our nerd friends. It's a space shuttle cockpit, right? Like, and some people love the space shuttle cockpit, right? Or they love the order book, kind of complex, Binance with the Fibonacci's and all that bullshit, right? But what most of Earth really wants is Uniswap. I want to trade this amount of this coin for that amount of that coin. Go. That's all I want, right? And that's all I can understand. And so Taostats.io is not that. And then along comes Backprop, which pretty much is that, right? So they have the coin market cap like front door. Site loads fast. It's in dollars, right? Like the other thing I hate about Taostats is it's continually pricing everything in Tau. I can't think in Tau. I think in dollars, right? That's fine if you want to put it there also, but like the primary interface should be dollars. And every single time I load that page, I have to like actually move the lever again over to dollars. I'm like, no, motherfucker, dollars, right? And like every single time, and it's really annoying. So I tend to use Backdrop because it loads really fast. It's in dollars, and it's like orders of magnitude simpler, and it's prettier. I got to say, it like just looks nicer. It's cleaner. I can sort of see everything and feel what's going on. So so I click through. And I can, see the stats on that particular subnet, plus a little explanation of what it is. Plus, I can, buy or sell it right in the interface, which is really nice. So so the tools, 60 days ago, 60 days ago, that didn't like nothing remotely like this existed. So both of them are quite good, and frankly, Taostats.io, it works fantastic, and it worked fantastic on day one, and that in itself is an extraordinary achievement. So I still do use it for trading. For looking around, I use Backprop because I like the interface better. I can see what's going on. Taostats.io, I know exactly what it's doing. I actually want the more information when I'm actually executing a trade. So because I'm a nerd, so I like that better. But most people won't, right? Most of Earth wants the Uniswap Coinbase-y kind of interface, which Backprop provides. And I think I think the next step in these tools is to provide the Solana / Ethereum experience. Maybe Sonic. I'm about to have. I'll give you a little alpha here. I haven't announced this yet. So tomorrow I'm interviewing Andre Cronje and Michael Kong of Sonic, right? Previously the Phantom chain. So new chain, 10,000 transactions per second, possibly scaling up to 1 million transactions per second very soon, with sub-second finality, a tenth of a second finality. So it could be an Ethereum virtual machine chain that competes with a straight face with Solana on all of Solana's speed, capabilities. So we'll see. So I'm gonna long story short is one of the things I'm going to suggest to them is that somehow they also get a Bittensor subnet universe exchange up and running in Sonic, because it's perfect for this. It's got Solana speed, right? And if they succeed in getting consumer adoption, they're up to $1 billion in TVL. They've surpassed Polygon and Optimism in just a few short months. So they do appear to be well on their way towards potentially reaching Solana-like heights, right? So we'll see. And most of the TVL is still in Ethereum, like 50% or more, kind of depending on when you look, of TVL and DeFi is in Ethereum. And then it's sort of, the other 50% just sort of spread out like, over Solana and some other things, more or less evenly. So Sonic could start eating into that because all the EVM applications can just be transplanted, just cut and paste your code over to Sonic, and now you're up and running on Sonic. So Aave has done that. USDC has done that. They've got native USDC directly on their chain. So all the utilities, and and if you have a choice of using Ethereum or this Solana-like Ethereum, what are you going to choose, right? Especially if you're a consumer. Anyway, long story short is I think they should get that up and running. The next generation, I think, of ease of use tools will be what I described earlier in the show, which is use your Solana. Just connect your Solana wallet, connect your Sonic wallet, your MetaMask, and using the native tokens that you already own, buy subnet tokens. That's going to happen. Somebody's going to crack that, and whoever does that's going to do incredibly well, I think. So.
Why do you think the masses want the simplicity over being able to see the metagraph and knowing all the information about the miners and distribution curve?
Because nobody gives a shit, right? Because 99% of humanity just doesn't understand that stuff, right? Like Bittensor's hard to, and Bittensor is also harder than most things to understand. So, what they want to see is, do they know, do people who invest in Tesla know how the cars work? Do they know like what the they tend to just they know they see Teslas on the road. They know that Elon Musk exists and he appears to be smart and important, and so they're going to invest in Tesla because it's sort of like a meme coin for Elon, right? And a lot of times it's been right. It's gone up, not recently, but in its history it's mostly gone up, right? Quite a bit. So it's been a good bet, right? So I think. So I just, I think I think that's healthy. I don't think there's anything wrong with a lot of people who don't understand this stuff. Where this energy is going right now is into meme coins that do nothing, right? It's going into Trump, right? It's going into Doge, or it's going into dumb stuff on Solana, right? It's going into stuff on Pump.fun. That's not useful capital. I mean, it's fun. I don't have a problem with it, other than I don't think the entire universe should be it. And too much of the universe is it right now, when that capital could be flowing into subnets and making AI better and better and better for Earth and for the market, right? So, and I think eventually it'll sober up and start doing that. And so I think so you want those meme coin people coming into the subnet universe, and that there's a giant amount of liquidity. Right, like we talked about earlier, how Virtuals and Eliza, those coins got pumped into the billions. Right, Eliza was up to like I think it was AIXBT, I think, in the Virtuals universe. Hopefully, one of them became worth $5 million. I can't remember exactly which one it was. But one of them, $5 billion. Right, so pretty big market cap.
Yeah,
and
not a bad market.
all of Bittensor has been like 1 or 2 billion. Right, so to have a subnet kind of go to 5 billion, that would be an event. And I think there are several that should be there, I think. So I think Shoots should be $5 billion right now. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Shoots and Targon combined are doing over 30 billion tokens per day. I mean,
right. So look, there's like serious shit going on in the Bittensor universe, and the world has not yet woken up to it. Well, the world doesn't have access. So why do we need that sort of final leg, that Coinbase interface? Because for the same reason that the internet needed AOL, or it needed the browser in the beginning, right? It needed a dopey, simple user interface that Joe 386 pack could understand. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you want adoption, you have to go meet the people where they are. Rome is not the marble of the Senate; it's the sand of the Colosseum. You got to like get down in the sand of the Colosseum, and Bittensor hasn't done that yet. It's still wandering around in the marble of the Senate, going, "Oh, us senators were so smart. Our brains are so big. Our craniums are filled with ideas all the time." Right? Like, I love the Bittensor guys, but honestly, the Brainiac shit is they're spending too much time. They don't think this is a problem, but it's a massive problem. You have to be in the sand of the Colosseum, and they're just not yet. They will be. Somebody will drag them there, and somebody will make billions upon billions of dollars by getting down in the sand of the Colosseum. That's what happens when you get product market fit, right? And you get the engine cooking. So, yeah, somebody's going to crack it, and it's going to be very, very big.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think a lot of the BitTensor people think it, build and they will come. You're saying someone's got to bring them there.
Yeah, no, that never build and they will come never happens. It never has, right? But like Bitcoin itself was weird and oddball and quirky. All these libertarians, like in 2011, were like, it's going to be a big deal," and they were right. Just like the Bittensor guys are right? But you needed Coinbase. You needed somebody to make it really, really easy to buy Bitcoin and to give like a user interface that normal people could use. And without Coinbase, and what happened to Coinbase? Coinbase, the founders became billionaires, right? So that's what happens when you slap a great UI onto something complex that's fundamentally correct. And if you believe the Bittensor, like, it could be the biggest opportunity in all of Bittensor, is basically slapping this front end together, and sort of and it's not easy to do. It's always harder to do than it sounds. But making something simple is difficult and complex. But the end result, if you can get to that simplicity, the rewards are enormous. So,
Agreed. There's a massive opportunity there.
yeah,
With this simplicity, assume it comes and the herd comes over from Solana and from all these other ecosystems. Do you think Subnet price will be linked to like profitability and the actual value they deliver, or will
yeah.
it be like the rest of crypto and just stay in this meme coin phase or era that we're in?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there will be some loops back to the Subnet token. The people I've talked to have said that they are thinking that through. Specifically, the Nova people. Because I asked them sort of the same question. Because right now, let's just set the table. In the Bittensor universe, even though the projects are incredibly well thought out and very serious people are making very serious AI, the Subnet tokens themselves are not ownership in their companies or their enterprises. They, owning the Subnet token does not give you a portion of the revenue that the AI is making, right? It's more or less sort of a meme coin for for the Subnet. and there is no real connection between how well the Subnet does and the token. Now, some of the subnets are starting to buy back their tokens, so they're starting to take some portion of the revenue they generate and buy their own token, which causes the price of the token to go up for everybody else that's not selling, or not that owns their subnet token. I think that's great, and I think we'll see more of that, but it's not a requirement, right? So, but I think the better subnets will do more and more stuff like that over time. The Nova people, I did ask them point blank. I'm like, okay, let's say you find the molecule that cures cancer, right? Like, if I'm a subnet owner, like, do I get a taste? Do I get to wet my beak? Like, what? How does that benefit me, right? And they basically they wouldn't commit to an answer other than, we're aware of that problem, we are thinking about it, and we're gonna once we figure it out, we'll do something. So that was basically what they said. And I believe them. I believe they will try to do something, right? So, and that could take many forms. Maybe they do share revenue, right? Maybe they start popping Tau directly into the wallets that own their subnet token. They could do that, right? Like they could get that information off the chain. there's all kinds of ways in which they can actually reward their subnet token holders, and I think the best subnets will do more and more of that over time. So, it's still early days. The flip side of that argument is, just thinking about Tesla again. I had a thought the other, maybe a couple months ago. I was thinking about stocks versus crypto and meme coins, and it occurred to me that there are meme stocks, but actually every stock is a meme, right? Like, why does anything have value? And the answer is because human brains in aggregate think it has value, right? So enough human brains are like, that thing, has value. This pop top is worth $1 trillion. If enough people think it's worth $1 trillion, then it is worth $1 trillion. At a certain level, we're all just clapping for fairies out here. Like, that's why is anything real? Well, because there's enough people clapping for that fairy, right? So, that goes for dollars, that goes for Bitcoin, that goes for gold, and it goes for stocks, right? So and people are like, well, there's fundamentals behind stocks, like there's Fibonacci's and blah blah blah. No, those are reasons. Those things cause the human belief, right? I'm not saying it's nothing. Like, for example, if Tesla, we know there's an order coming up for 1 million cars from, I don't know, China or somebody. That is a fact which influences my perception of the value of Tesla, the company, right? So, but it doesn't actually cause the value, right? It influences my perception. That's really how it works, right? So, in a certain sense, all stocks are meme coins for companies, unless unless I'm getting dividends off of it and there's something sort of more tangible to it. It's just a meme coin for that company. So, I think. So I'm sort of two minds about it, I guess, is probably where I'm ending up on this. But I do think the subnet should provide some benefit above and beyond just being a meme coin for that particular subnet.
So the access to the top 64 validator UID slots isn't enough.
Yeah, and it could be that the subnet token is the token you need to use. It's the utility token for that particular AI, right? So you got to pay me in my token, which people now are like, oh, utility tokens didn't work. That was bullshit. Well, it didn't work because Gary Gensler attacked everybody who did it, right? So evolutionary pressure killed off that whole subgenre of crypto of the utility token. But the idea is completely has merit. It's exactly what the United States did with the dollar when they unhooked it from gold in 1973, and then hooked it up to Saudi Arabia. The petrodollar, right? You had to have dollars to buy Saudi Arabian oil. So what was the dollar in that case? Well, the United States dollar was a utility token for the Saudi oil app, right? So, and it worked. Right? That's what gave the dollar value. It created demand for dollars. Less true today than it was back then, but that was what sort of kicked off the petrodollar, and that sustained the dollar through that period. So I do think, subnets requiring their own token as payment as a utility token is in fact one way that they could reward token holders.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting way to look at the U.S. dollar, which has a lot of truth to it. Do you see any other drivers of value towards these subnets? Like, do you think what more could they do? Do you feel like a company where they will just run buyback programs like Apple does in the billions of dollars eventually?
Yeah, that's a really great point. I mean, real companies in the real world buy back their stock all the time. This is not like a bullshit thing, right? Like, it's a real thing. It's a legit thing, put it that way. It's not like a scam thing, right? So, right, which it sort of sounds like a scam thing when you first hear about it. You're like, oh, you're just pumping your own token, right? But that's the way the real economy works, also. So it's not like it's necessarily a terrible idea. It is a little artificial. It'd be nice to have organic demand, and that's it. But that's probably not always going to. That's probably that's true a lot of the time, but it's not always true. So it's okay to buy back your token or your stock or whatever when it's down, and you can get a lot of it for a cheaper price. Why not? You're as legitimate a buyer as anyone else. So, sorry, I lost track of the question. What was the question again?
The question was unclear. I mean, honestly, do you think the success like Shoots and Targon have had makes BitTensor feel more legitimate now with how many real world tokens they're processing?
Yes, it absolutely does. I mean, Shoots in particular, and Targon. I got to lump them in there too, but Shoots in particular has been the breakout star of the BitTensor universe. And you're right, just because and when you say tokens, you don't mean crypto tokens. For those who don't know this, you mean tokens, AI tokens.
Yeah,
So
large language model
yeah,
tokens, input prompts, output
yeah.
prompts.
So what you're saying is that it's getting an extraordinary amount of use, like real world usage, in terms of inference, right? So it's actually being consumed. Its product is being consumed at vast quantities already. So that does, you know, in a world where Grok and ChatGPT and Gemini exist, some people are still choosing to use the Shoots product, right? So that does speak incredibly highly. But none of these things has really broken out into $1 billion market cap yet, right? And I think one of them will, and it could be Shoots, or it could be Targon, or it could be Nova, right? We just don't know. One of these things I think will roar. There'll be one that'll roar to life, way ahead of all the others, and that'll wake up the world, and the world will be like, "Holy shit, this BitTensor thing! Like it's starting to produce real products." And then we'll see, probably the equivalent of the ICO phase happen inside the BitTensor universe, where just everyone and their brother will be breaking down the doors to invest in every subnet, right? Like so, I think all subnets will just whatever's around you could almost throw a dart, like it won't matter, like they'll all just sort of explode once that first one explodes. But we haven't had that first giant success, that very loud giant. Like you and I look at Shoots and Targon, and we're like, "Wow, that's significant." But most of Earth doesn't. Most of Earth is like, "What's that again?" Like, what? 30 million. That's tiny. Like, who gives a shit, right? Like, my company was worth 30 million in its Series Seed. So 30 million is not success. That's being born, right? Like it's sort of where their minds are at, which is fair, right? Like it is. It's a very tiny amount, right? So I think, but I do think that we will see a giant breakout success, and then we can sort of say, yeah, we've, this legitimizes this way of doing things, and this will be a force to contend with in the future.
Do you think that breakout moment or success will come from like a Shoots or Targon flipping something like an OpenAI, or will it come from like a niche market that kind of springs up out of nowhere? How it almost felt like ChatGPT happened for the world back in 2022.
Yeah, well, I do think it'll come from a niche. I have a hard time believing Shoots or Targon will flip OpenAI. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think it will, because I think I think that's too tall an order even for them. Um, but I do think like one of these little ones, one of these specialized ones, will flip in a vertical that nobody else sees coming. I just had its AI subnet on hash rate about 3 or 4 days ago. Yeah, it was just Friday, so yeah, three and a half days ago. And they showed me some testing, some benchmark results. They are apparently right now the best in the world at detecting whether a block of text or a giant PDF is produced by AI or human. And they're and I haven't double checked the benchmark, so I don't know. But the benchmark was a third party, and it did show them at the top, and they were the best in the world at detecting this stuff, right? So if there is a corresponding large market of people who need that product and need it to be the best in the world, and they start buying it at scale, they basically said, universities was one big potential client, right? Because the professors want to know if their students are using ChatGPT to write their papers, right? So that's one potential, very very large market. Um, on the other side, the students. He also confided, or he said it on the show, so it wasn't confidential. But the students also want to use the same tool to make sure that whatever they've produced by AI doesn't look like it's produced by AI, right? So it's sort of an arms race for both sides have to have it in order, once the other side gets guns, you got to have guns. Like there's no way around it. You now have to have guns to even maybe survive, right? So I that's what's happened with AI now, and specifically within the student versus professor arms race of homework being generated by AI. He's selling the guns to both sides, right? So it's a great place to be in any market, right? So arms dealers are the best is the best business of all, right? So I think I think that is potentially in a position to do very well, and if that does break out, that'll be one of the niches that just sort of proves to the world that this way of doing things is the best. And so now, why is their product the best in the world at detecting AI generated text? And by the way, he doesn't handle images or video or anything else. It's just text, right? So it's specialization. And he's basically, he's got 256 miners all competing to be the best in the world at generating text because they're competing to get Bittensor Tau tokens and subnet tokens, right? So this way of motivating people, this prize money, kind of bounty through emissions universe looks like it's working. So if it works at scale in some vertical, that will make a lot of people sit up and notice. Because there's a lot of people in my feed who don't really, they know about Bittensor, but it's not really high on their list of things to think about. There's Robert Scoble who follows me, and we chat back and forth times. I know he sees me posting about this shit. Every once in a while, it's like, yeah, that's interesting. Anyway, on to what OpenAI is doing, right? Like it's sort of his vibe. And I understand that because our world is pretty tiny so far. But I don't think it's going to be for long because it's percolating. All the right little percolations are happening. And I think we're going to see I think we'll see a breakout hit. It'll happen. It'll be really slow and then it'll happen really fast. Like I think that's how it'll happen. And it'll be one subnet that just sort of screams up out of the pavement and, shocks the world. It'll be like, that cartoon where the come on, do something. And then the line goes up and makes the being's head, pop open with blood spurting everywhere. I think it'll be like that.
Yeah, I agree. Do you typically defense is easier than offense, like just in general, but it seems like with AI, the offense is starting to have the edge. Like in the student versus teacher example, more kids are using like AI to do homework than they're able to detect. Do you think
Yeah.
that's just because of adoption of the institution is slower than the individual?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes, I think teachers are largely old fuddy-duddies who, the kids always take to the new technology faster than the olds, right? Because their brains are more plastic and more open to learning, and every kid, has more skin in the game, than the teacher, ostensibly, to be able to use AI to cheat on their homework, right? So I do think, I haven't hung out in universities in a long time, so I don't really know. I can only tell you what it was like when I went to school, and a lot of those university and teacher people, they're looking backwards in time, right? It's just their nature is to look back on what's been proven and what's what's accepted dogma for whatever branch of science or whatever topic they're teaching, right? They look at the past. That is just their bent, right? Whereas the kids they're looking to the future because they're kids, and their life is about learning how to be an effective adult, right? So it's all about looking to the future. So their natural bents are towards learning about the next thing. So I don't think that's changed. I think that's probably just human nature. So that my guess is that the kids are going to pick it up a lot faster than the professors. But at a certain point, it'll become so overwhelming that the professors and the teachers, they'll buy AI detection tools in bulk, and there's nothing, in terms of sales. That's where you're gonna sell the most, right? So you're gonna sell, mass quantity licenses. Like a university is gonna license it for all their professors, right, and make it available blanket style, and then basically command all the professors to start using it, right? You have to have your students turn in their homework via email, right? And then the email is collected by the by the AI, and it sifts through all of them and tags the ones that it thinks are AI, right? So it'll happen like that.
And do you think, because talking school here, do you think they'll switch like their model to incorporate AIs more because they'll just be like, this is overwhelming, it's unavoidable, people are going to use AI, let's embrace it? Or they're going to double down and be like, no, we'll just detect all AI, you got to do it by hand, everything.
It's a good question. It reminds me of calculators. So I grew up, I was I was born in 1967, so I've been kicking around since the 60s, which means I grew up in kind of the 70s and early 80s. And handheld calculators were a new thing, right? That was the fancy new cool shit in the 70s, right? And TRS-80s, like that was like, oh my god, that's like high tech, right? That was the PCs that Radio Shack came out with that were somewhat affordable. But the handheld calculators, I had one, and most people I knew did not have one. Then after a while, they started sort of showing up, and then the other thing that happened was Casio put out a watch that had a calculator with little buttons on it built into it, right? And I had that, and the teachers didn't quite know what it was. They're like, oh, is that a watch? Okay, cool. But they didn't get that I had a calculator in my watch. I mean, holy shit, right? I'm Dick Tracy all of a sudden, right? And the teachers resisted it at first. They didn't want people to be able to use calculators, but by the time I got to college, using calculators on exams was perfectly acceptable. So it goes from being heresy to being acceptable relatively quickly, even in sort of a non-technical age like the 70s and early 80s were. Now the internet's ubiquitous and AI is, things are moving a lot faster. Phones are ubiquitous. So I have a feeling that probably AI will be allowed in schools. We're only in like year 2, year 3 of AI being sort of consumer ubiquitous, available. So I think probably by year 5 it won't be a big deal.
And then in terms of like modalities, text LLM was the first one that like reached mass adoption. OpenAI GPT-04 has a pretty good image model now. Do you think image is going to be the next modality that becomes mainstream, like these LLMs have?
Oh, images are mainstream. I mean, have you seen the Ghibli Studio Ghibli
Yeah.
artwork yet? Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
if you're on X, you can't get away from it. Like everything's being Ghiblified. It's like this visual virus. It's sort of like in Three Body Problem when they had the dimensional attacks. That I don't know if you read that series, but anyway, a bunch of aliens basically are running around the universe, reducing dimensions of their enemies. So if you're 3D, they make you 2D. And apparently the universe used to be 12D. Like that was the common way everything was. But all these dimensional wars reduced most of the universe to 3D. And now there's a war on, enemies are reducing each other to 2D from 3D. So the Ghibli thing reminded me of that because it's like, the regular world of reality has been mostly Ghiblified over the past week or so, which is all AI image generation on X, right? It's so prevalent. So I think it's already prevalent, and I think the thing that's coming up now is a lot of the artists, anyone who's a visual artist is complaining, especially from the Ghibli on behalf of the Ghibli studio people. They're like, hey, so isn't Ghibli didn't Ghibli provide the artwork which trained the AI, and so isn't this in some form plagiarism of their IP and their style of artwork? I think the answer is yes, it is. So should it be allowed? Should Studio Ghibli get paid somehow? I don't know the answers to these, but I do agree that some level of theft is occurring. You could say the same thing about text, right? Like, on a certain level, anyone who's ever written text and published it, that's been inhaled by the AIs, and that's being used even fractionally for the AIs to generate the result. So is that it's just 1,000 million micro plagiarisms versus cutting and pasting a full paragraph from an educational paper or a PhD thesis or thesis paper or something. It's still plagiarism. It's just very tiny and very hard to detect. And the same thing's happening with art. So I don't know the answer to how to solve that, because how do you sort of pay everyone who's ever produced anything? You'd have to pay everyone who's ever produced visual art. And how do you even know that the AI ingested your piece in particular? Like, I think somehow, I don't know. I'm not sure what the right answer is. And then the other side of that argument is, you know, aren't we all in some ways also doing the exact same thing when we create art? So for example, if you look at Harry Potter very clearly is a retelling of Lord of the Rings in many ways, right? You've got wizards, right? You got the Gandalf versus the Dumbledore. They're pretty much the same character, right? Harry is pretty much the Frodo or the Bilbo. You got giant spiders. You got a Dark Lord who is vanquished and who is now returned, right? And a lot of people don't believe he's returned at first, right? So there's that. You've got like the Horcrux, which is like the One Ring, except there's 7 of them, right? So, but in the Lord of the Rings, the One Ring is a magical thing which holds part of the soul of the Dark Lord. And if you can destroy the One Ring, you destroy the Dark Lord, right? In Harry Potter, if you destroy all 7 Horcruxes, that destroys the Dark Lord. It's the same thing, right? So to what extent did J.K. Rowling micro plagiarize from J.R.R. Tolkien? I'd say she sort of macro plagiarized, right? It's pretty, like, the elements are pretty recognizable, and so does she owe anything to Tolkien? And is what the AIs are doing really materially different than what J.K. Rowling did? When you read Harry Potter, like I read Lord of the Rings, it didn't even occur to me as I was reading Harry Potter how similar to Lord of the Rings it was until afterwards, and I thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess it feels like a very different work, right? So there's and Star Wars is Dune combined with Flash Gordon, combined with American Graffiti, right? The speed stuff. So there's some other things in that blender, but that's pretty much what it is, right? So I don't know. I'm not sure what the right answer here is yet.
Do you think maybe some governing body kind of officiates all of it? And they're like, oh, you stole from here and you stole from here, and they try to protect IP?
Well, they don't. I mean, the government wants to do that, right? The government always wants to get involved in everything. I mean, in the early days of the internet, and the answer usually is leave the government out, right? So, in the early days of the internet, there was a lot of talk about copyright and fair use. So, for example, a lot of memes today use the Simpsons or South Park characters. But back in the early days of the internet, like if you did that, people like fucking lost their minds, right? Because they're like, wait, that's my copyright. How did you do this? You can't do this. And the studios in particular, and now it's just sort of commonly understood that that's okay. And anybody can use any piece of artwork. And, Warner Brothers is not going to come after me if I post a picture of Bugs Bunny on my X account, right? Like, that's absurd, right? And so, but in the old world, that would be me using their copyright, and I would get sued, right? So whatever the new state of this situation is, it has to sort of bend to the natural way in which the new technology operates. And, I think whatever the answer here is, the answer is not, some ministry of copyright or ministry of AI that sort of decides what's been used and what's not been used. So I think that would lead to a horrible. I mean, basically, would kill AI. I think you'd basically make the AI. It'd be so inefficient and so one-sided, because of course it'll be political, right? So it would tend to favor one side over the other, and we'd be living in that world of favorites again. And I just think it would be bad. I mean, I can tell you that the copyright world in the early days of the internet, there was a moment where I showed the internet to Sean Connery. I was working on the Fox lot at Delphi Internet. Make a long story very short, he had the office next door. He came over and was like, "So, what you all do here at Delphi Internet?" And he came in, and I said, "Well, sit down, Mr. Connery. I'll show you." And this was like 1993 or 4 or something like that. So we were on 14.4 modems. Things loaded in very slowly. It'd be like zzz, for an image, zzz, like that. And over the course of like a minute or so per image, right? So Connery sat down, and I was like, "Oh, I know. I'll show him the James Bond homepage." And at this time, there were like maybe 1,000 total web pages on Earth. So I show him the James Bond homepage that I just seen like a couple weeks ago. And as the image loads and clarifies, and you realize it's a picture of him from Doctor No, he just jumps up and starts screaming. He's like, "How did you do that? You can't do that!" Like I just created witchcraft or something, right? And I didn't even understand why he was so mad. What he was mad about was the fact that I had, he thought like Delphi Internet was the internet, and I was in charge of it, and so I had used his image without his permission, right? And it really freaked him out, right? And that was just how it was thought of back then. And the answer was not to let Sean Connery get his way, because if Sean Connery had his way, the internet, there'd be no images on the internet, there'd be no memes, right? It would be like, not even a fraction as awesome as it is. So whatever the answer is, it's not that.
How do you think reality moving forward will be with these AIs where you can basically just replicate anything with a prompt? Like with these image models now, you can just replicate something and use it yourself. Or voice cloning.
Yeah, I think I don't know, but I think music, sampling was sort of the same, question back in the day, right? Because before sampling, sampling basically enabled new types of music to arise and new art forms to arrive. Photography. So yeah, right. When photography was invented, painters were suddenly like, what the fuck? Like, what? How are we going to make money now? Like, we used to, most of their money came from doing portraits of rich people, right? And all of a sudden, the rich people are like, no, I want to have a photograph taken. And the painters are like, oh fuck, what's a world going to be like when you can just push a button and create a painting, right? Like that seemed horrific. But what really happened was a new art form arose, that of photography. Right, and you had Annie Leibovitz, who it's not just the ability to take a picture; it's the ability to take a picture well, and there's a whole science to that, right? So, it's true that painting sort of fell away. I mean, there's still painters, but painters went in the direction of abstraction, right? How can I paint something that can't exist in real life? So that was sort of ultimately their reaction to the invention of photography. Photography became a new form of art, right? There's artistic photographs, and that, instead of just sort of that head-on sort of obvious shot, right? Then there became a new art form known as art photography, right? Same thing happened when radio gave way to television, right? The early television shows were just a person with a microphone, right, with a camera pointed at him. But that wasn't television, right? Television is cutting between scenes and camera tracking and dialogue and showing, not telling. And everything that you did with radio, you had to throw out the window because television was a completely different medium. So I think AI is likewise a new medium, a new sort of knowledge medium. And I don't know where it'll go, because I think we're in the age right now where everyone's just pointing a camera at a guy with a microphone and calling it television. And whatever it is, like, we haven't figured out tracking shots and cutting film yet, but we will. And I think over the next 10 years, it'll become pretty obvious.
Yeah, this is probably a good point to wrap up with then. I'll ask you one last question here.
Sure.
What advice would you have for being able to either navigate or identify things that can evolve with AI and not become obsolete because of AI?
Well, I think it comes down to thinking about what AI, what are the trend lines with AI? So, AI, so one trend line is that AI is best used. There are things a human still does better than a computer, and I think that will always be true. At least I hope it will be. But I think it will be. Because I think AI mirrors our brains, but it doesn't mirror our free will. So the AIs don't have any agency. There's nobody inside of an AI looking out. But I do think our own brains work the same way as an AI. I think we're just continually prompting our internal AIs, and that's how we think, right? That's just my personal theory. So hopefully that's correct, right? So we've replicated the brain, but not the soul, not the will inside, not the agency that pokes the AI. So AI is best used as to make a 10x human. So it takes whatever a human is doing and makes them 10 times more efficient. So I think betting on finding those humans that are good at using AI and betting on those humans, whatever that is, that's one trend. The other trend is that I've observed is, over the last year, especially with DeepSeek, AI is tending towards zero. It's tending towards free. Well, it's exponentially getting smarter, right? So its usefulness is tending towards infinity. So usefulness tending towards infinity, AI itself tending towards free. What does that mean? Well, so where is that valuable? And the place that's the most valuable is in robots, because robots are the infleshing of AI. They are, or it's the instilling. Is probably a better way of putting it, right? So it's making them it's making AI manifest in meat space or steel space, right? It's making it manifest in our real world, and there can only be so many robots at a given moment. Possibly the humanoid ones are the best incarnation of that. We'll have to see. But I'm extremely bullish on humanoid robots for a lot of reasons. But this is one reason why, is because as AI gets better and better and freer, what benefits from that? The robots. Each robot becomes exponentially more valuable as AI becomes smarter, right? Without any additional cost. So, and there can only be so many widgets, AI widgets. It basically takes AI and makes it a physical widget, and I think there's almost limitless demand for humanoid robots worldwide, and so that's another trend. So I would bet on humans and bet on humanoid robots. That's what seems like the best way to play AI is to me.
Well, Mark, it's been a pleasure having you on for a second time here. Thank you.
It's always fun to come on. Thank you, Grant. I appreciate the invite back.